In this video, we will be taking a look at enriched and fortified foods. The practice of enrichment and fortification was a public health initiative that began in the 1930s in order to ensure that people were receiving the proper levels of micronutrients that were commonly deficient in the American diet. The first process we will look at is fortification. This is where commonly deficient nutrients are added to a food product. These are foods that naturally do not contain these particular nutrients. However, because these are common food items and these nutrients are common deficiencies, the thought is that by adding these nutrients to these common foods, people are more likely to get these deficient micronutrients. Fortified foods, then, are those that have undergone the process of fortification. The first example that we will take a look at is table salt. Table salt not only has sodium, which we are probably all familiar with, but it also has iodine. So, in other words, table salt is fortified with iodine. Now, this came about because there was a recognition that there were an increased number of cases of goiter. Now, goiter is an enlargement of the thyroid gland, making it difficult to swallow and breathe. And goiter comes about when we don't have enough iodine in the body. The thyroid relies on iodine, and the thyroid hormone controls growth, supports a healthy metabolism, and aids in cell repair. In other words, the thyroid gland is going to be impacted by low levels of iodine. This can eventually lead to hypothyroidism, which is when the thyroid gland isn't able to produce the thyroid hormone. Now, cases of goiter, once this became a practice, fortifying table salt with iodine, we saw that cases of goiter decreased after this became a common practice. The second example of fortification that we will look at is with milk being fortified with vitamin D. This was in response to an increased number of children with rickets. Rickets is when the bones do not form properly. As we can see in this picture, the two children on the ends, their bones aren't straight, they are crooked, and that's part of what vitamin D deficiency looks like. There was a major public health push for this particular fortification of milk because it was impacting children. Now, fortified milk or fortifying milk with vitamin D, it's not required with the exception of evaporated milk. However, when this first became a practice, the government financially incentivized milk producers who fortified their products with vitamin D. Now, this has just become more of a common practice that milk producers fortify their products with vitamin D. Also, I forgot to mention, vitamin D is important when it comes to absorbing calcium and phosphorus. Calcium and phosphorus are the two micronutrients that comprise of the majority of our bones. They're not only important for bone health, but they're also important for other functions such as nerve cell transmission. The other process is enrichment, which is adding nutrients to a food product that has been lost during processing. In other words, unlike fortification, where those foods don't naturally have those nutrients, by enriching products, we're saying that we're taking a food that does naturally contain these nutrients. However, we're needing to add back some of those nutrients because they were lost as a result of processing practices at the level of manufacturing. The one product that we'll take a look at is flour and bread when it comes to enrichment. Breads are enriched with many different vitamins and minerals. The milling process strips away these nutrients. So for instance, B1 or thiamine is impacted by milling practices. And thiamine, if we don't have enough thiamine in our bodies, this can result in a disease or a disorder called beriberi. There's two different types of beriberi, one being wet beriberi, which affects the heart and the circulatory system. And then the other form is dry beriberi. This results in nerve damage and decreased muscle strength. Now, this is not a required practice, and actually, public interest and demand wasn't as high for the enrichment of these flour or bread products compared to the public health interest for that of salt and milk. Um, for one, people weren't as aware of these conditions such as beriberi or the neural tube defects. In addition, it was more expensive for smaller milling companies to enrich their products with these vitamins and minerals. And so as a result of that, they didn't really incorporate this into their practice because they wanted to maintain competitive pricing when it came to competing against larger companies. Those larger mills, it was easier for them to enrich their products because they had more production opportunities and they were able to sell more products and make more profit that way. Nowadays, though, it is more common to see these products, these flours, breads, even cereals enriched with things such as B vitamins, folate, and iron. We understand more the importance of enriching these products with these micronutrients in order to ensure that people have the opportunities to acquire those essential nutrients for their bodies.